Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach, and yes, I've been through the marriage trenches myself. This show is all about how to actually deal with trauma in relationships and make it work without losing your mind. If you're ready for honest talk, no fluff, and tools that cut through the noise, tune in because let's face it, love can be a bit of a mess, but it's a mess worth figuring out. This is Love and Trauma, the real deal.
What if everything you were taught as a child, being agreeable, selfless, always putting others first, was actually the very thing keeping you stuck, exhausted, and unhappy? If you've ever felt like no matter how much you give, it's never enough, or if the thought of saying no makes you so anxious because you spent your whole life making sure everyone else is okay, then you are going to want to stay with us for this episode. I sat down with the amazing Amy Sanders. She's a best-selling author, master's certified wellness and life coach, entrepreneur, and fierce advocate for women's empowerment. And she's helped thousands of women break free from the cycle of self-sacrifice, heal from trauma, and finally start putting themselves first. But before Amy became the confident, powerful woman she is today, she spent years trapped in an amazing amount of people pleasing, self betrayal, and working herself to exhaustion just to feel worthy. And growing up, she was taught that her value came from how much she could do for others. As a child, she spent hours doing grueling labor, terrified to ask for a break. And when she lost her older sister to suicide at just 10 years old, the unspoken rule of just keep going, don't rock the boat, and take care of everyone else was cemented even deeper. That mindset carried into her adulthood, leading her into a marriage that she knew just wasn't right. She had been conditioned to prioritize everyone's needs before her own. And it took years before she could even say no for the first time. And even after leaving that marriage, those same patterns followed her into her new relationship. And Amy is also a chapter author in the Women's Thrive book, which was the volume 4. And she was able to share her story. And I met her and then I sat down with her. And I am excited for you to hear our interview today. So, with that, we will get started. Excited to sit down with Amy Sanders today. We were able to meet in Miami for a Women Thrive retreat. And Amy is part of the Women's Thrive book release, where she has her own chapter in this book. And it is absolutely amazing. And I can't wait to talk to Amy today about that chapter and her life experiences. So thank you for joining me, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm like so excited about this because we get to see each other again, first and foremost. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like we had the best time spending time in Florida together, and then it was all of a sudden done. So I'm so excited to be here. And then also just hopefully be able to touch some people just through the experiences that I've had. So thank you.
And I know we are. Absolutely. So why don't we just kind of start with the chapter, just your chapter in the book.
Yeah. Really, as my life has unfolded, as I think a lot of people's lives unfold, you start to see certain patterns and things that continually show up in your life. And for me, I got really curious when I was like looking in the mirror and I'm like, I have no idea who this woman is that I'm looking at. And this is nowhere where really the way I needed to start it was some of the feelings and things I was having as a kid that led to how the rest of my life unfolded. Because we really do learn how to let people treat us and how to treat other people and all of the conditioning and things that happen like within your family systems, within your community, within your religion. All of these things really play a role, right? And so my chapter starts as a 14-year-old girl. And I'm outside in the sprinkler. Like my parents always had us do really big man labor type projects that most kids are not doing. And so as I am 6 weeks in, this massive sprinkler system project, digging the trenches, not even having a machine dig them. We're digging them by hand. The dirt is super hard, and I just am dying. After 12 hours, I'm like, some friends walk up and I'm like, Dad, can I go hang with them? And I'm so scared to ask him because usually I'd get in trouble if I asked for something like that. And I did. I got in trouble. I could not go. And so that's how I started the chapter, just to show like how big of a people pleaser I was. I was really great at self-betraying, and it continually got better. I got even better at it until I end up marrying someone after him only dating me for 3 weeks. I say yes. So, which I like to just point
We're
out, like every fiber of my being did not want to marry him. My whole body knew this was wrong, but my brain was taught to say yes, to taught to people please, and taught to not make him feel bad over me, right? Like heaven forbid if I make him feel bad by saying no. So I said yes, which led into an unhealthy marriage, and life totally unfolds from there. So that's what my chapter was about, was that even though that's how my life was and unfolded, that's not even close to where I'm at today. And so I love to show women and be the example of what's possible, because we truly can change our stars if we make the decisions to do it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you also had, did you have a loss of a sibling as well?
Yes, I did. So at the age of 10, my older sister, who was my idol, actually committed suicide, which completely, of course, fractured our family in a way that most families just will never understand. But at 10 years old, I lost my idol essentially. So that was another just extremely traumatic event for someone that age.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I'm sure that impacted your parents
Oh, yeah.
and the way they
Oh, yeah.
parented.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were my parents. And one thing about the chapter that I don't really go into, I want to say my parents did the best they could with what they had. They went through extremely difficult childhoods. And back then, like you didn't really focus on any kind of trauma healing or anything like that. And so they both met each other in a very unhealthy state, and then went on to have 7 kids in this unhealthy state. And the suicide also, I mean, through parenting and through just how our family dynamic was. And she also had some mental disorders, but a lot of it was because of our family dynamic that we ended up losing her. And so my parents did the best they could. I don't want to sound like they didn't support us. Like they gave us an amazing life compared to where they came from. And so I do look at that, but was our life healthy by any means? No. No. And after she committed
Yeah.
suicide, they were, I mean, can you imagine? I look at both of my parents now that I have children. I'm like, I have no idea how they did it. My dad pretty much pieced out of the family for like 2 years. He was a traveling salesman, and we hardly saw him. And when we did, he was not happy. So it was a hard time, but it is part of my story, and it's something that, we had to get through and overcome as best as we could.
I know. I'm trying to find that quote, girl. Oh, I love this quote that you had in the book. I had been conditioned to reject myself before I rejected anyone else.
Hmm. I was very good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the first marriage
Okay. Let's do
and
it.
how you ended up figuring out that the past, how that ended up impacting that relationship
Hmm.
and how you started to overcome that.
Yeah. So, as a child, like I've mentioned, I was taught to be agreeable, be quiet, don't really speak up. I'm a bubbly person. You can probably hear it through my voice if people are tuning in, watching this, whatever. I am naturally a bubbly, happy person, but that doesn't mean I'll speak up about what I want. And that's what I was taught not to do. So I was taught to any kind of feelings of like a need or a want that I had, I would be told no, or, that I'm too much or whatever. And so I was taught to not want for myself, to self betray first and foremost, and make sure everyone else is okay, serve everyone else. There's also some codependency with my parents, making sure they're okay, that they feel okay, that they're happy with me, all of that. And so when it came to my ex-husband, uh, we were friends before we dated, which I do like to say we were friends. We were in like a group of friends, but he was ladies' man, interested in everybody else but me. And there was nothing there. Like it just was, like I thought he was hot. He was a male model. Maybe should have been a sign for me to not marry him. But anyway, just some of those guys can be a little full of it. But so when
Full of
all of a sudden,
themselves.
yes,
Full of
yes,
themselves.
yes. And so when all of a sudden he pours his heart out to me out of nowhere, I was like, what? No idea. I didn't want him to feel bad. And again, he's a male, which I was also conditioned, very patriarchal family, that like you agree to men, men are superior to you. And so when he's proposing to me after literally just starting to date 3 weeks, I am frozen. I don't even know like how to say no. It's like it can't even come out of my mouth, but that's what I want. And I was like so scared. So again, male figure, someone asking me for something, it's almost like I thought I didn't have a choice. And so I agreed. And I was so sick to my stomach. I mean, all of the signs of my psyche, my emotions, my body, everything was alarming. That was like, this is a no. But I said yes, self-betrayed. And that is because there are characteristics in him that are very similar to my father's. So it's the pattern that I already knew. So whether it was healthy or not, it was somehow like what I thought was okay. The way he treated me, because of the way I was treated in my family system, um, I thought that was okay. It was like I thought it was okay, but I also didn't think it was okay. It was like I was in this inner conflict, especially because looking at other relationships, like I saw that mine was different. And I would even talk to him about it and he would just be like, "Don't compare us to other people." And it's like I would be like, "I'm not trying to compare. I'm just seeing a very big gap between us and them, and I just he would make me feel like I was crazy. So I'm like, "Okay, okay, okay," but looking back, there were so many crazy things about that relationship that people like when I tell them, they just like drop their jaw. Like, whoa. But I accepted it again because of what I knew as a child. And so it's like you teach people how to treat you. And that was what I did. So I allowed a lot of really inappropriate things. I allowed him to treat me poorly. I allowed certain things to happen within our marriage that are deal breakers for most marriages, but it's because it's what I thought I had to do. The religion I was in was still a very well. This is what I have to say about the religion. I still practice, but I do it with what feels good to me now. So it definitely looks different. But the religion I was in was like extremely strict. You do not divorce. If you do, there's like you feel like you're wearing the scarlet letter. Um, when I said when so we get engaged. This is a story. Okay. We get engaged. Usually what happens is people are like celebrating. They're like, yeah, oh, the parents are celebrating, la la, whatever. Um, when we tell my parents, they ask me to who, because our relationship was that new, right? Like that they're like, who? When we go to
Oh,
his
dear.
family to tell him or to tell them, his parents look at us with like this stern look, and like his dad smiles and is like, congrats. And they're like, we need to have a talk. They sit us down, and the first words out of their mouth are, you do not divorce no matter what.
Oh,
I'm like,
girl.
when you're getting engaged, you're not thinking about divorcing. Like it's the last thing from your mind, right? But that was the conditioning is my point
Mhm. You were
of,
conditioned
yeah,
many, many ways
yeah,
for this to occur.
right.
It seemed you obviously you had a significant loss in your history. I can tell that you were brought up in a way where you keep going, right?
Yeah,
Not
just keep
giving
going.
up, and then the
Yep.
religion and that divorce is really frowned upon. All of those things set you up.
Oh yeah, for sure. Frowned upon. And then other people, okay, so I live in Utah. People get married so young here. It's very
Yeah.
normal for all of your friends to be married at like 21 years old. Our frontal lobes aren't even completely developed. So I was getting married a little bit later because I was the old age of 22, right?
You had a full year of life experience.
Yeah. Like,
Oh,
so you look at that and it's just like, as an adult now looking back, I'm like, holy cow, but it's what everyone was doing. It was very normalized. A lot of my friends were married by 19, 20. And here's a guy that's saying, he's asking me, and heaven forbid if I say no, because that would make him feel bad. So that's what you do.
and I do think that's a big component is when you're a kid and you grow up in a certain way, you don't know if that's normal or not normal
No, it's just what it
for
is.
a very long time.
Right.
And I can see how we end up being in relationships because it's familiar
Hmm.
that, and then it's at some point much later. And it seems like as I was reading your chapter, that you started to realize.
The gap just kept getting bigger and bigger. I remember right after we first married, I mean, throughout the engagement, there were things where it's just like red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. But heaven forbid if I say we're not doing this anymore because the parents have now spent money on this and he's all excited and I'm still in turmoil. But I end up doing it. The night before the wedding, he calls me and I said, don't even talk to me. I can't see you. I just don't want anything to do with you tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. Like that's how I was the night
Hmm.
before I'm getting married, right? So it's like, what in the world? It's like my body knew, my mind knew, my soul knew, and I just kept going down that path anyway to please other people. And as, the marriage unfolds, the gap just keeps getting bigger where I'm seeing things. I'm realizing, hey, yeah, there, I should not compare. People say don't compare, except for why is ours so different than everybody else I know? And how come what that woman's husband says to her are words that I long for that I've never even heard or haven't heard in years, which are very like common words in marriage, like I appreciate you or thank you for dinner or you look good tonight or I love you. I mean, those are the things that I was never hearing. And um, it was hard. It was very lonely. I felt like I was in a, I felt like I had the constraints of the marriage but the loneliness of being single, not having anyone in your life. It was a very, very lonely, empty marriage.
Yes, I've experienced that as well, where it's like, how can I feel so lonely when I'm in bed with somebody
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
same bed? It's really a sad place to be.
Yeah.
But girl, you stuck it out for 11 years and three kids.
I know, but I know it's crazy. But this is what I'll say about it.
Yeah.
One, again, the religion really kept me there. I was really scared for what would happen if I were to walk away. I also was the mother of his kids. I didn't want to break up our family. Again, the religion was also attached to that. Um, And the other thing was I wanted to be sure. I remember the moment that I could not be married for 1 minute longer. Like I remember just like I was sobbing and I was like really just letting one of my best friends hear it. And I stayed for 5 more years. And that was the moment where I felt like I couldn't go on one more day. And so it was 5 more years of really hard. But also when I look back, there has never been, I heard for so long when I was like yo-yoing back and forth, like, what should you do? What should you do? That the majority of people always wish they would have dot, dot, dot. I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have just tried harder. I wish we would have, you know, I exhausted every part of my being and every option that we had. And there was never a moment and still has not been where I have any kind of like, I wish I would have. They're done. There was never any. So I'm like, I guess I stayed long enough to get to the point where there's no more emotion. It just is done. I've heard, I don't know if this, is true or not, but I've heard that if there's any kind of emotion, positive or negative, you're not really ready to leave. So that's
And what I
another thing
loved
I was
about your
glad about.
story is the small steps.
Yeah.
You got to this point where you realized that there was another way. Banging your head against the wall, trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells. never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another emotional response that seems completely out of context. And the harder you try to fix it, the more discouraged you feel. So, what's the issue here? Navigating marriage with a trauma survivor is different. The love languages don't work. Date nights don't work. Self-help books don't help. But here's the good news. I've created something that does work. Something built from years of hard-earned lessons and real-life experience. Ready to take the first step toward real change? Let's talk. I'm offering a free one-on-one call where we'll dive into what's going on in your relationship and figure out a way forward together. This isn't just another quick chat. It's a chance to finally be heard, to share what you're going through with someone who truly gets it. No judgment, just real support. So if you're ready to start making sense of it all and find a little more peace in your marriage, book your free call now. Your happiness, your peace, and your relationship are worth it. Let's do it together.
Because I was so big of a people pleaser enough to marry someone when I knew I shouldn't, they had to be small steps. But each time I took a step, I reclaimed a little more of my power. And when I say that, it wasn't the power I lost from just marrying him. I feel like it was the power that I lost even in childhood. It was the power that I was born with that somehow was taken from me, if that makes sense. And
It
so
does.
I,
You literally spoke of the first time that you said, no, I'm not going to go to the reunion.
yeah,
And that was kind of the first time you've
it
been
was
able to
so
say
scary.
no.
It was so scary. So for those of you guys who haven't read the book, I started to say no to little things,
Yeah.
not out of being selfish, but really being self-full. And so every year we would go to this family reunion. And when I say family reunion, there were over 600 people that would attend this thing. It was massive. It was humongous. They still do it today, which I do admire. I do admire that family dynamic. Like it is pretty cool. But with that, the men would do whatever they wanted, and the women had to it rains because it's Memorial Day weekend in Utah, it always rains.
Every
So it
time.
rains like every Memorial Day. And so you're taking care of these little tiny kids in the rain while the men do whatever. Like they're playing games and they're whatever. And so I always, even though I loved the people that were there, I did get really close to a lot of the relationships within his family, but I hated feeling like it was so hard with little kids in the rain camping in a tent. It was not pretty. And so
Girl, that sounds like hell to me.
it
You're not
literally was.
alone.
Yeah. And my
Yeah.
kids were little from the time when I left him.
Mm.
They were 4, 6, 4, 5, and 8 is how old they were when I left him. So they were little. And so during all these years of taking him to camp out, um, finally one year I said, I'm not going. And he did not believe me and he thought I would come. And I was like, I'm not going. You can take them. I packed them for you. They're ready to go, but I'm staying home. And as he left, I felt so incredibly liberated that I did something that I wanted to do, that this was for him. Every year this was for him, right? Sure, it was his family and I made some relationships there too, but this was their thing. And I was the one that had to do the shopping, the packing, the trying to keep, oh, by the way, there was like a really big river. So you're always scared that the kids are going to go fall into the river. And so it's like you're always on edge as this mom at that camp out. So I said no. And it was amazing.
And you learned that he could do it himself.
Yeah, and he had to, right? All of a sudden he started
Yeah.
showing up and doing things. I was like, "Wait, what?" But I have to admit, I was enabling a lot of the behaviors by doing all of the things.
Yeah.
And so,
It's
yeah.
it's definitely a lesson of learning what you can control,
Hmm.
taking control of those things, and then realizing your part
Right.
in certain things is this epiphany moment.
Yeah. Which
So,
you have to have a
which
lot of those,
can take
right?
a long time. Mhm.
Yeah.
And so tell me, so you made the decision to leave.
Mhm. Yeah.
What did the leaving look like for you?
Oh, it was since then, I've gone through even harder things, but up to that point in my life, that was the hardest thing I have ever done. It was the hardest thing for so many reasons. Number one, this was my relationship. I was walking away from this relationship that I had had for 11 years. And even though it needed to happen, that is still a loss. It's a very big loss. It's grief. It's all the things. I felt like I was the one splitting up the family. Um, I was labeled at my church, so I was scared of that, and it did happen. I lost relationships even within my family, including my dad. I lost a lot. The loss was extremely great. However, at the same time, as I made that decision, the most amazing things started happening. And I'm a woman of faith. And honestly, I can see God throughout everything that was happening. And even having him out of the house because the relationship was so toxic, once that was gone, I was such a broke single mom. I like to tell people, I'm like, I was a broke single mom. Guys, it was $24,000 with 3 kids that I was living on by my own. I didn't move back in with my parents. Like, that's how much I was bringing in at the time with 3 little kids. Do the math. It was awful. But I got really scrappy. And even though you can look at the finances and be that was so awful, and the grief was so deep, and I was, lonely in a different way now, and there was just so much. At the same time, there was such a sweetness between me and my kids. There was a peace in the home that I hadn't seen really ever since I had married him. And then just the reclaiming of myself and like my own self-respect and learning truly what Amy wanted was incredible. So it's like, even though my life got way messier in certain ways, there was still peace throughout that period of time. And there was so much growth and so much healing that could never start happening until I was away from all of that. So there's always beauty in the mess, right? And there was definitely beauty.
What did you do during this time period to make sure that those same things that took you to where you were in that relationship weren't going to be the same things that you took into another relationship?
Yeah, good question. It's interesting because I really did take some of those same things into my new relationship.
Of
So
course,
even
yes.
even though I tried not to, it did happen, which is why I laugh, because I've
Yeah.
had to learn within this relationship some of those enabling behaviors that I would do. Um, However, there were certain things that were non-negotiables as I moved forward. At the time, because I was in so much pain and heartache, there was a lot of betrayal and other things that I was also healing from. I don't want to discount it, make it less than it was because it was a lot. So it was like the heartbreak of leaving, but also a lot of other heartbreak of other things that were going on. I had sworn that I would never remarry, and I only wanted to date guys so that they could tell me I was pretty and take me to a nice dinner.
Very superficial. Yeah.
I was like, can you just open my door, tell me I'm pretty, and pay for dinner tonight? Like, I just want out of the house. Like, that's really what my goal was with men.
Yeah. Yeah.
God had a different idea for me. And so when I met my now husband, he came at a time that at the time I say is the worst time in my life for him to have shown up, but it probably was the best for both of us looking back. And so I wasn't quite ready to have like a real relationship when it started happening. So I was dating guys and they were telling me I was pretty and they were opening up my doors. And good news for anyone listening that's like, leaving their husband or whatever. Um, it turns out guys have more money in their like 30s and 40s than they did when they were 20. And so our dates got really cool.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, and I was so broke at the time that I'm like, oh, you're gonna take me on a weekend trip and like a private plane? Okay, so all that stuff.
Absolutely.
So that stuff started happening and it was really exciting, but I just wasn't interested in any of these people, not really, because I had
Yeah.
planned on just being single forever and figuring it out. But anyway, he landed in my lap and that, that new chapter started unfolding, and we're still together today. But uh, I was good at keeping some of my own boundaries that I used to not keep. Some of the enabling behaviors I did start seeing show up in my current relationship, and we've had to do a lot of work around those because it also led to some really hard things that have happened in our relationship. And so, what I've learned is as you're continually developing and growing and making progress, you will choose the path of least resistance. And a lot of times that's what you already know. And so, yeah, you got to stop yourself in your tracks. And that's what I talk about in the chapters, like asking yourself, like, what do I really want? Why do I want that? Because,
I loved those questions.
yeah, they're
I
simple.
very impactful, and it's simple,
Yeah.
but that's exactly what you want to do. So why am I wanting this? Is it because it's the way it's always been for
Hmm.
me? Is it
Yeah.
the way that I feel most comfortable, or is there something else going on?
Yeah. Really asking the why, like, okay, so why? And then why, what do I actually want? Like, what is it? Because a lot of times as women especially, I know that so many women are similar to how I was, is like you just agree, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Oh, sure, yeah. And because we're nurturers, right? We want to help people, we want to connect with people, we want to feel appreciated by people. And all those things are not bad. They're just bad when you're self-betraying, when you're really truly not speaking your truth, and when you are really truly turning away from things that serve you for things that don't. That's when it's a problem. And so getting really curious with a simple question that, like you said, is very impactful will help you find yourself again, which is what I had to do. And so,
And then in a relationship, then you're able to put some words to things,
yeah, yeah,
which is so important, because that's where a lot of resentment and disconnect occurs, is when we can't put words to things. And so we're both thinking that something else is going on, and it may not have anything to do with that. But if we
mhm.
can't put words to things, then you can never get to a resolution.
No, you can't. And really, I like to say, as we're doing this work, it's like I look at like the street, like I'll clean my side of the street, you clean your side of the street, and then let's meet in the middle and have a good time. And
Yeah.
understand that your mess is your mess, my mess is my mess. We can help each other, but let's not be so codependent that it's unhealthy. Let's support each other. And that was probably the biggest lesson that I've had to learn with my new husband. So we have a really tricky relationship with our kids. We have 7 kids now. So I went from 3 to 7, and 5 of them are 1 year apart. And
Oh
when we got
boy.
together, a
And
lot of
they're
them
teenagers,
are teenagers.
right?
Yeah, we got all
Teenagers.
kinds of teenagers. Yeah. So, and so, funny story, when we were dating and we are getting more serious, we read this book about blending, and it said if you have any kids between the ages of 13 and 20, don't get married until they're past those ages. And I was like, we won't be getting married for like over 20 years if that's the case. So we didn't follow that book's advice, but we see why
Yeah.
that might have been put into a book. And so it's complicated, right? Second marriages are really complicated as is, but if you both have kids, it gets more complicated. If there's one ex still living, it gets more complicated. If there's another ex, if there's two exes, it's more complicated. So it's like we just signed up for the most complicated dynamic. If there's mental illness, it's more complicated. So anyway, that's our life. Um, but what I was going to say is because of my people pleaser, I really started to lose myself as a stepmom because of trying to please these people that are impossible to please. By the way, no one wants a stepmom. It's not something that anyone really wants, no matter how cool you are. And
Yeah.
so I've had to learn, even within those relationships, like how to show up and not take it personally, because a lot of the things that were going on had nothing to do with me, even though I was choosing to be hurt by them. So it's like learning that this isn't personal. This is just situational, and it ebbs and flows and comes and goes. But yeah.
Teenagers have an amazing way of knowing your weakness
Oh my
and
gosh, I know.
sticking a stick right in it. It's very difficult to not
I
take
know.
that personally. So how did you do that? How do you not take it personally?
Um, when it comes to my stepkids, well, first of all, when it comes to people, all of us are in our own what we call dreams, right? One book that I absolutely love that I'd recommend everyone on the planet reading if you haven't already are The Four Agreements. It's called The Four
Yeah.
Agreements.
Mhm.
And when you don't take things personally and realize that everyone is in their own dream, their own paradigm, they're living their own life and essentially not meaning to be selfish, but it's about them, right? When you look at it like that, you're able to give more grace. I'm not saying that you can allow people to mistreat you, but you can come from a place of understanding. And so when it comes to my stepchildren, they are amazing humans, but they have been in a really unhealthy, toxic environment. And they have been taught that certain people are not okay to love, which is me. I'm not okay to love. Now that they're getting a little older, it's getting better, but we had to go through a lot of really big, hard stuff in order for the truth to come out. And I do think that the truth will always prevail. If you stay in a place of integrity and if you stay in a place of doing the best you can to love, and when I say integrity, I mean like for yourself. Because when you're coming from a place of integrity to where you're always proud of how you showed up, you don't let a lot of that resentment and a lot of that crap creep in. And it gives other people the freedom to show up how they want to show up. And that, you know what? They might not show up the best. And that's okay. You can just look at that and be like, right. But in this moment, I am proud of how I showed up, which means I have self-trust. And when you have self-trust, you have more self-love. It just compounds. All those things compound, which is how it helps me not take things personally. As difficult as a lot of the experiences are that we have had to go through, I am totally proud of how I've showed up. And I've gotten better over time, which we want to evolve and we want to grow, right? So that's great. But I can look back and just say, yeah, I'm glad how I showed up, even though they might have not showed up in the best way for me. But now a lot of a lot of the stuff like that happened over time, and they've seen me over time, they love me for it. It's changed.
Coming full circle.
Yeah. And so it's like, and I say this like this is my experience with having stepchildren, but you can do this with any relationship,
Yeah.
standing in your power.
I kind of want everybody to get a sticker that says, I don't think this is about me.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Identifying that is the key to a happy and released life, right? I don't think this is about me. I'm not going to take this personally. And I'm not going to get caught up in the toxicity. And like you said, not be in the integrity that I want to be.
Yeah.
Huge life lesson.
It really is. And it really feels better. I like to tell people when like, if you're in a situation, if you're in front of people and your heart feels open, that feels better.
It
But the
does.
only way your heart is going to feel open is you allow it to be open and just trust that you have your own back. There's other people in your world that are, going to have your back. And sometimes they'll do a really good job. Sometimes they might not always, right? But you can always have your own back and you can always stand in integrity and you can always speak your voice. And sometimes people won't love what you have to say, and that's okay. That's okay. Because there's going to be other people that will see you, hear you, get you, and those are your people.
Thank you so much for sharing all this today. I
Yeah.
think it's so impactful, and I am so proud of you and where you have come and how much you have done and how you're using your story to help others. It's
Thank you.
amazing. One last question for you. What is the next chapter for you? You already wrote this chapter. Now, you talk about that in your book about rewriting your story. What does that look like?
Yeah. My story now, I'm living a pretty dreamy lifestyle. It's like my story's totally unfolded to be what I used to dream about, which is incredible. But what I love doing now more than ever with other people is helping women find their power, find their voice, and stand in their truth. And what that looks like moving forward is I do work with a lot of coaches, helping them also get their voice out and their word out and there's their unique genius while also writing more books. And so I am in the middle of writing. I have started four. There's one that I'm now really pushing to finish by the end of the year. And it is essentially about stepmomming.
Oh,
It's
girl, we
about
can all
stepmomming.
use that. Yes.
And
Yes,
so
as a fellow stepmom.
what's funny, like the stepmom experience is just, it's unique. And there's really not a lot of resources out there that help you feel like you're normal and that you're okay. And so even though I help, everything I do is around women empowerment. I love to show you how incredible you are because women are literally the best. We're amazing, but we have to step into our own power in order to shine. So that's what's next.
Love that. Oh, can't wait for maybe 4 more books from you.
I know that's just like, oh, I got to get stuff out, guys. I just want to help the masses. So that's the goal. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Absolutely loved that interview. And there were so many little nuggets in there that I had a little bit of a hard time trying to figure out which things I wanted to focus on for the end of the show. But I have chosen them. And so I really want you to hear that if you've lost yourself, and I want you to ask yourself, are you choosing the path of least resistance? Sometimes our biggest fears may come to fruition, but that is the one thing that needs to happen in order for you to live your best life and release yourself from your past. The other thing that I wanted you to take from this interview is that if you are feeling lost, if you are feeling like you're not really that proud of how you're showing up, it doesn't have to be these big, huge steps that you take. Break it down into small steps. As Amy said, breaking it down into small steps to gain some power, to gain some of your power back. So don't think of it as this big, huge thing that needs to change your whole life, but maybe just taking some little steps that will help you get you where you want. And finally, I loved her talking about how if things are a mess, it's okay because there's always beauty in the mess. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, and I can't wait to see you next week.
All right, that's a wrap for today on Love and Trauma, the real deal. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their insights. Couldn't have done it without you. Now, for those of you looking to take this journey further, I've got something special. Head to my website to grab Real Tactics, Real Healing, a survivor's playbook for navigating a relationship with a trauma survivor. It's packed with everything you need to know, do, and say to navigate the emotional minefield, find your balance, and regain your self-worth and happiness.